In the high-stakes world of billionaires, mergers and million-dollar handshakes, reputation is everything. But what happens when a man who thinks he owns the room humiliates the one woman who actually controls it? Welcome to Twilight Tales, where real power isn't always loud, and revenge is served with grace, class, and a billion-dollar impact. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you stories where ego collides with truth, and the most unexpected people rise to leave the world stunned. Now let me ask you something. Would you treat someone differently if you knew they held your future in their hands? It's a question billionaire Douglas Vane never thought to ask. He believed money gave him the right to walk above others. But in one moment, one smug refusal to shake a black woman's hand, he lost everything. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about reality. A story about how respect isn't optional and humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The woman in question? Nia Freeman. Sharp suit, quiet confidence, and an even sharper resume. She wasn't a waitress. She wasn't staff. She was the managing director of a $2 billion investment fund. And Douglas had no idea who he'd just insulted. What came next wasn't a shouting match. There were no viral clapbacks. Just a calm walk into a boardroom, and a quiet decision that would pull the plug on the biggest deal of Douglas's life. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk you through everything that happened, moment by moment, until the powerful man who said, "I don't shake hands with staff," realized he'd just turned his back on the hand that could have saved his empire. Why does this story matter? Because too often people judge based on appearance, race, or role. They speak before thinking. They mistake wealth for wisdom. And they learn, too late, that the world no longer tolerates arrogance dressed as success. Nia didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to prove her worth. She already knew it. And by the end of this tale, so did everyone else. So buckle up. This isn't just another boardroom battle. It's a masterclass in quiet power, unseen influence, and how one moment of disrespect can cost you billions. Let's begin. The estate was buzzing with luxury and influence. High-ranking executives mingled over hors d'oeuvres and whispered about stock splits and upcoming mergers. It was one of those exclusive invite-only finance summits, the kind where deals are made with a glance and reputations are sealed with a handshake. And then he arrived. Douglas Vane. The name alone sent ripples through the crowd. Self-made billionaire. Real estate tycoon. Known for his aggressive takeovers and ruthless boardroom tactics. He strode in like he owned the air itself. Sleek Italian suit, slicked back hair, flanked by two silent bodyguards in dark glasses. People parted like the Red Sea. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. This was his world, and in his mind, everyone else just lived in it. Near the bar stood a poised black woman in a navy blue pantsuit. She had an aura of calm authority, refined but firm. That was Nia Freeman. She had arrived hours earlier, quietly observing, asking insightful questions during panels, and writing notes into her sleek leather-bound journal. When she saw Douglas approaching the host of the event, she made her way over with professional poise. After all, part of her role that day was to engage key players. Her firm had been eyeing a major investment into Douglas's latest infrastructure expansion. This could have been the moment to initiate that conversation. The host, recognizing Nia, smiled. "Nia Freeman, I'd like to introduce." She extended her hand with grace. "Mr. Vane. A pleasure." But Douglas didn't take her hand. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he gave a brief scoff, low and dismissive, and muttered just loud enough to be heard by the circle around him. "I don't shake hands with staff." The silence was instant. Heavy. Sure. Nia's hand paused in the air for only a moment. Her expression didn't change. No gasp, no furrowed brows, just a calm, knowing smile. She retracted her hand slowly and gave him a polite nod. "I understand," she said gently. No offense taken. But everyone in that circle, they saw it. The disrespect. The assumption. The billionaire who judged by color, by gender, by role, and didn't even bother to ask who she was. Douglas moved on, already talking about a new land acquisition deal in Nevada, completely unaware that he had just insulted the woman whose firm held the keys to a $2 billion investment he desperately needed. Whispers began circulating, but Nia didn't flinch. She went back to her seat, sipped her water, and flipped a page in her journal. She had seen this before. Too many times. Men with more money than manners. But she wasn't angry. Not yet. She was observant. She was calculating. She was in control. And what Douglas didn't know, what he never stopped to consider, was that the staff he refused to shake hands with wasn't there to serve him. She was there to assess him. Nia Freeman wasn't always sitting at billion-dollar tables. In fact, she was raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse in Baltimore. Their tiny two-bedroom apartment overlooked cracked sidewalks and constant construction noise, but inside those walls, Nia was raised to believe in excellence, discipline, and above all, dignity. From an early age she stood out, not because she spoke the loudest but because she listened the deepest. She earned her place at one of the most elite prep academies in the state through a full scholarship. While others were distracted by teenage drama, Nia was absorbing books on economics and global finance. Her classmates laughed when she told them she wanted to manage $1 billion fund one day. They're not laughing now. By the time she was 26, she had a dual degree from Harvard in finance and international policy. By 30, she was a partner at one of New York's fastest-growing private equity firms. But she didn't just follow the traditional Wall Street path, she created her own. Nia specialized in undervalued infrastructure projects: roads, water systems, energy networks. She believed real power came not from investing in luxury but in building what people actually need. And the fund she helped co-found? It wasn't just big, it was revolutionary. Backed by global investors and sovereign wealth funds, Rising Core Capital had $2.1 billion in active capital under management. And Nia? She sat at the top as managing director. Her presence at that luxury summit wasn't to mingle with the elite, it was to determine whether Douglas Vane's company was worth betting on. Because here's what most people didn't know: Douglas Vane was running out of time. His company, Vane Global, had hit a critical juncture. Overextended, overleveraged, and facing intense government scrutiny, Douglas needed massive private capital to float his next big phase, a North American transportation corridor promising green jobs and long-term economic return. But without new capital, the whole thing could collapse. He'd spent months trying to court Rising Core. He didn't know that the woman deciding his fate would be standing 3 feet away, and that he'd dismiss her with one line: "I don't shake hands with staff." It wasn't just a comment. It was a message. And it showed Nia everything she needed to know about his character. To him, titles mattered. Appearances mattered. He judged by surface. But Nia? Nia judged by substance. She believed power was quiet, intentional, and often worn by those the world underestimates. And in that single interaction, Douglas revealed himself, not just as rude but as reckless. Because if he couldn't recognize leadership when it stood in front of him, what did that say about the decisions he made in business? That moment didn't embarrass Nia. It exposed Douglas. She closed her journal slowly, took one last glance at the laughing billionaire across the room and stood. It was time for the board meeting. And it was time for a decision. 2 hours later, the summit's executive board meeting was in full swing. Inside the sleek glass conference room, 20 of the most powerful people in global infrastructure finance took their seats. Billionaires, banking executives, investment gatekeepers, all gathered to discuss the allocation of nearly $5 billion in strategic capital for upcoming transportation and energy projects. At the head of the table sat Charles Drexler, the summit's chair and a legendary voice in global development. Seated around him were powerhouses, each of them waiting for one thing: to hear Rising Core Capital's position on the North American Corridor project led by Douglas Vane. Douglas himself walked into the room confidently, nodding at familiar faces, smirking at competitors. He adjusted his cufflinks as he took his seat, not far from the front, expecting to hear the pitch in his favor. He had no idea what was coming. Then the double doors opened again, and in walked Nia Freeman. Wearing the same calm confidence, she walked to the center chair reserved for keynote evaluators. A few people murmured quietly. Some straightened in their seats. Most had heard of her, but many hadn't realized she was that Nia Freeman. Douglas raised an eyebrow. He still didn't quite connect the dots. The chairperson cleared his throat. "Let's begin. Ms. Freeman, Rising Core Capital's insights are critical here. The floor is yours." Nia stood slowly and scanned the room, making eye contact with every person, except Douglas. "Thank you, Mr. Drexler," she began. Rising Core Capital has spent the last 3 months conducting an exhaustive analysis of the infrastructure proposal submitted by Vane Global. We examined financial forecasts, environmental impact, community engagement models, and leadership structure. Douglas leaned back in his chair confidently, arms crossed. "But we found something troubling," Nia continued. "Something we could not ignore." She paused. "We believe Vane Global lacks the ethical stewardship necessary for a $2 billion partnership. We believe that leadership begins with values, not branding." The room stiffened. Douglas sat up straighter. His jaw twitched. Excuse me, what exactly are you implying? I'm not implying, Mr. Vane, she replied smoothly. I'm stating it directly. Gasps rose across the table. Nia continued, undeterred. Rising Core has decided to withdraw all consideration for partnership with Vane Global, effective immediately. Instead, we'll be redirecting our capital toward a collaborative proposal that prioritizes inclusion, local job development, and long-term environmental resilience. Douglas turned red. This is outrageous. You can't just. I can, Nia interrupted calmly. And I just did. Drexler tapped his gavel once to restore order. Mr. Vane, you've had your say. Please respect the floor. Douglas looked around. The faces that once nodded at him were now blank, unreadable. Silent. Because in a room where power shifted every day, everyone had just seen it pivot in real time. This wasn't just a rejection, it was a message. A declaration. Nia sat down, her expression unreadable. But beneath that quiet demeanor was steel. Douglas had misjudged her once. There would not be a second time. The rest of the meeting unfolded, but the tone had changed. The whisper networks exploded outside the room. Nia Freeman's firm had just pulled the plug on a Titans project. Because of leadership, yes. But also because of a moment that most thought was insignificant. Because in a world built on deals, data, and dollars, character still mattered. And one careless comment about not shaking hands with staff had just cost a billionaire everything. As the boardroom cleared out, Douglas sat stunned in his leather chair, watching as the rest of the executives left one by one. The whispers, the polite nods, the awkward averted glances, it all told him one thing. He was no longer the room's center of gravity. He clenched his jaw and stood abruptly, storming out of the room. But as he rounded the corridor, still seething from the blindsiding rejection, something caught his eye. There she was, Nia Freeman, standing near the balcony with her assistant, speaking calmly and confidently. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't celebrating. She was simply at ease. Douglas stalked toward her, unable to hold back. Hey, he snapped. You couldn't have just come to me directly? Nia turned slowly, completely unbothered. I don't owe you a private explanation, Mr. Vane. This was never personal. Douglas chuckled bitterly. Could have fooled me. I don't even remember meeting you. She raised an eyebrow. Exactly. And then Douglas saw it. As she crossed her arms, her blazer sleeve shifted slightly, revealing a glint of silver and emerald on her finger. A distinctive ring. He froze. That ring, he had seen it before. 15 years ago, at a leadership mentorship event, one of the keynote guests, a legendary African-American venture capitalist, had handed out custom rings to a dozen young ments. Only the top candidates. The ring symbolized not just prestige but power and legacy. Douglas had tried to cozy up to the man at that event but was politely dismissed. Now here that same ring sat, on the finger of a woman he had just tried to belittle. You were in that program? He asked slowly, the realization dawning. I was one of the youngest ever accepted, Nia replied calmly. And one of the few who turned that mentorship into a capital empire. He blinked, stunned. And the best part? She added, stepping a little closer, her voice lowering. You shook hands with that man like he was royalty. But when you saw me dressed like staff, you couldn't be bothered. Silence. Power doesn't always look the way you expect it to, she said. You might want to remember that next time you walk into a room. And with that she walked away. But for Douglas, the ring was burned into his memory. It wasn't just jewelry. It was proof that he had failed to recognize someone extraordinary, someone who carried the legacy of greatness and the weight of earned respect. That moment would haunt him. Because in his world, deals were lost over poor numbers or bad timing. But today? He lost a $2 billion opportunity because he didn't look past the surface. And now the entire industry would be watching. That night, headlines flashed across the investment world. Rising Core Capital pulls out of Vane Global, citing leadership concerns. Power shift. Nia Freeman rejects Billionaire's corridor deal at Global Summit. Ethics over ego, the black woman who said no to power. And in every photo used for the press coverage, Nia stood tall, that emerald ring subtly glinting in the sunlight. The same ring he had ignored, just like her. But the world would no longer ignore either. By morning the world had caught fire. News outlets from New York to Nairobi were buzzing with the story. Financial blogs, diversity think tanks, and even lifestyle magazines were scrambling to cover what had become more than just a failed deal. It had become a symbol. Black woman silently dismantles billionaire's power play. He refused to shake her hand. She refused his $2 billion deal. From boardroom bias to boardroom boss, Nia Freeman sets new standard. Nia Freeman had become a quiet legend overnight. Clips from the summit leaked online. Someone had caught the moment she calmly rejected Douglas Vane's entire proposal, and another video showed her walking past him at the welcome dinner, her ring clearly visible. TikTok and Instagram were flooded with side-by-side images. The moment of dismissal versus the moment of dominance. Hashtags like hashtag the ring said no, hashtag power in silence, and hashtag not your staff trended across social media. But it wasn't just social media buzzing, investors were shifting too. Vane Global's stock dipped sharply the next morning. Several of their smaller partners pulled out of ongoing negotiations, citing ethical reconsiderations. One even tweeted, "Leadership matters. And so does respect." Meanwhile, rising core capital received an influx of new interest. Foundations and tech-backed funds began reaching out to Nia's team. Government officials across several states requested meetings to explore public-private projects. In less than 24 hours, Nia Freeman wasn't just a respected investor, she was a movement. Journalists begged for interviews, but Nia only released a brief statement. "My silence yesterday wasn't passive, it was purposeful. I believe in leading by values, not volume. We don't need to shout to make history. Sometimes, we just have to say no." It was signed simply. Nia Freeman, Managing Partner, Rising Core Capital. P.S. The ring was never about status. It's about standard. The public ate it up. And while her calm inspired awe, it also unearthed a deeper conversation. News programs began hosting debates. Why had Douglas Vane assumed she was staff? Why do we still associate power with a certain look, a certain voice, a certain gender, a certain skin tone? A professor at Howard University summed it up perfectly during a televised interview. What happened wasn't just a rejection, it was a reclamation. Nia Freeman didn't embarrass him. She reminded him. Reminded all of us that respect isn't given to titles, it's earned through action. Meanwhile, Douglas Vane was reeling. His team went into full damage control, issuing a vague apology. "We regret any misunderstanding or impression that did not reflect our deep respect for all professionals at the summit." But it was too little, too late. In private circles he was called careless. His name became a cautionary tale in executive coaching circles. Don't pull a Vane. And as for the staff at the hotel? They had noticed everything. The same doorman who had watched Vane brush past Nia now nodded with pride when her car pulled up. The elevator operator, the kitchen staff, the valet, all of them followed the story. Because they knew how it felt to be unseen, passed over, misjudged. Now, one of their own, someone who had once stood quietly in their shoes, had made the world see. And the girl in the elevator, the one Vane thought was just staff? She'd worn the ring the whole time. Long before she stood in front of billion-dollar deals and boardroom headlines, Nia Freeman lived in a modest two-bedroom home on the south side of Chicago. Her mother was a nurse, her father a mechanic. Money was tight, but their values were rich. Discipline, grace, and humility weren't just lessons. They were survival. From a young age, Nia understood something others took years to realize. True strength didn't need to be loud. While other kids demanded the spotlight, she studied quietly in the library. When her classmates rushed to argue their ideas, she listened. And when the school district nearly cut the after-school science program due to budget issues, it was Nia, only 13 years old, who wrote the most compelling letter to the city council, helping save the program. It wasn't the first time she would speak through action. By 16, Nia had built her first prototype for a clean energy water filter, earning her a scholarship to a STEM summer program at Stanford. That same summer, she was selected for the Young Innovators Roundtable, where she first met Elias Monroe, the retired black venture capitalist who would later give her the emerald and silver ring. At that roundtable, Elias noticed her not for her outspokenness, but for how intently she listened to everyone else. "You don't lead with ego," he told her after a panel. "You lead with presence." That's when he slipped her the ring. "Only a few have this," he said. "It's not for show, it's a reminder of what you carry and who came before you." The ring, elegant and understated, carried the Freeman family motto etched inside. "Still waters break stone." By her 20s, Nia had quietly grown into a powerhouse. Not the kind that bragged on magazine covers, but the kind that moved funding into under-resourced tech schools, mentored single mothers learning to code, and built partnerships with both Wall Street and local grassroots organizations. When Rising Core Capital was founded, Nia didn't advertise it with confetti. She launched with a statement of purpose. "We invest in people the world overlooks." And she meant it. While others chased media coverage, Nia made moves behind the scenes. She helped fund dozens of minority-led startups without ever stepping in front of a camera. She pulled entire communities out of debt with sustainable microloan programs, and nobody knew, until they saw her ring in that elevator and then again on that summit stage. Her silence, people now understood, wasn't shyness, it was strategy. And it wasn't just her personal life that followed that philosophy. Nia's business model, too, operated on discretion, impact, and intentionality. She didn't invest for flash. She invested for legacy. And that's why her rejection of Douglas Vane hit so deeply. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about standards. She could have taken his money, played nice, and made the headlines happy. But instead, she reminded everyone that not every opportunity deserves acceptance, and not every billionaire deserves a seat at the table. Quiet power doesn't beg. It doesn't posture. It waits. It watches. And when the time is right, it moves. Nia Freeman moved. And the world felt it. Back in her hometown, a mural was painted overnight on the side of her old middle school. It featured her image, regal and steady, with a simple phrase scrawled beneath. She said no and built better. But Nia wasn't seeking praise. She'd already returned to her office, back to work, reviewing pitch decks from young visionaries who reminded her of her 13-year-old self. She still wore the ring, not for the world to see but for herself. Because the ring didn't make her powerful. She made the ring mean something. Douglas Vane wasn't used to losing, especially not publicly. For decades he had dominated negotiations, dictated terms, and bent smaller companies to his will. But after the summit fallout, he found himself in unfamiliar territory. Clients were backing out. His board demanded answers. And the internet was roasting him mercilessly with memes captioned, "When your handshake costs $2 billion. At first, Douglas did what he always did, denied, deflected, and dismissed. It was a misunderstanding. She was too sensitive. People are blowing it out of proportion. But none of it worked. Even his own advisors told him, "This isn't about business anymore, Douglas. It's about character." So, for the first time in his career, he sat alone in silence. No assistants, no PR team, no lawyers, just him, a video of the summit replaying on loop, and a growing pit in his stomach. He watched himself walk past Nia Freeman, dismissing her presence without a second glance. He heard his own words echoed online, "I don't shake hands with staff." It wasn't just a misstep. It was a mirror. And he didn't like what he saw. He made a decision, not out of desperation, but out of something he hadn't felt in a long time, shame. 3 days later, Nia received a request. Not through an assistant, not through a lawyer. It was handwritten. Delivered directly. "Miss Freeman, I was wrong. I misjudged, underestimated, and disrespected someone who deserved none of it. Not because you're powerful, but because you're a person. If you'll allow it, I'd like to apologize, in person. No cameras. No boardrooms. Just accountability. Douglas Vane." Nia didn't respond immediately. She didn't have to. She didn't owe him grace. But she understood what it meant to lead, even in moments when others didn't deserve your time. Quiet power wasn't just about silence, it was about choosing when to speak. So 2 weeks later, in a quiet corner of a nonprofit tech center she helped fund, Douglas met Nia. He wore no suit, no tie, just humility. "I came here because I need to understand what I clearly missed," he said. Nia looked at him, not with anger but with clarity. "You missed that people are more than what they wear, how they look, or where they stand in an elevator," she replied. "Respect shouldn't be earned through power. It should be extended through decency." Douglas nodded, struggling for words. "I thought I was a builder. Turns out I've been bulldozing." Nia's face softened just slightly. "Then maybe it's time you learn how to lay bricks properly." It wasn't a partnership, nor was it forgiveness. But it was a beginning. Douglas later committed to funding several minority-led entrepreneurship programs, not for publicity but because he knew he had a long way to go. And while he would never reclaim the $2 billion deal he lost, he gained something far rarer in his world. A second chance to become decent. Back in her office, Nia placed the letter in a drawer, not as a trophy but as a reminder. Some men learn from power. The wise learn from being humbled by it. Power isn't about the loudest voice in the room. It isn't about the size of your bank account, the flash of your watch, or how many people you command. Real power is subtle. Purposeful. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself, because it simply is. Nia Freeman didn't walk into that summit looking to make headlines. She didn't need the world's attention. She had work to do. People to support. Legacies to build. But when she was disrespected, Not just as a woman or as a black entrepreneur but as a human being, she responded with silence, with dignity, with clarity. And in that moment, the world learned what a ring on a little black girl's finger could represent. It represented the mentors who came before her. It represented a movement too quiet for cameras, yet too powerful to be ignored. It represented every overlooked child, every underestimated dreamer, every voice dismissed before it even spoke. Nia didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. As for Douglas Vane, his fall wasn't just poetic, it was necessary. Sometimes people like him need to be shaken before they wake up. His refusal to shake hands cost him $2 billion. But what he gained, humility, perspective, and a chance to rebuild, might be worth even more. Because it's never too late to change. But it will always be too late to undo the damage of arrogance, if left unchecked. So here's the question for all of us. Who are you when no one is watching? Do you extend kindness to the one cleaning your office, or only the one signing your paycheck? Do you assume the girl in overalls is just there to observe, or do you ask what she knows before you decide who she is? Because that little girl fixing the Mustang might just own the track. Let this story remind us that greatness doesn't always wear a title. Sometimes it wears oil-stained sleeves, and a ring that quietly means everything. Purple circle if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, don't forget to show some love. Like this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any powerful stories like this one. Drop a comment below. What did you take away from Nia's journey? And if you're new here, welcome to Twilight Tales, where truth and fiction blend into lessons that linger. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, stay powerful.